Awesome. I'm excited to be back with you guys, and I've got RJ Johnson here. Very, very amazing man. He's done a lot of different things in his life, from owning a big bank, or at least managing a big bank. I think you were president or vice president of a big bank, and on through that process, went down a crazy life full of stress. And I think what he has to talk about is so important to what we're experiencing today, because all of us are dealing with massive amounts of stress. And RJ actually released a book called The 7 Secrets to a Stress-Free Life, which is amazing. I'm sure he's going to cover some of that today. But really a lot of impactful things he's been through, from there. I won't tell all his story, but I know that he's been through and handled drug addiction, a divorce, like a lot of various things that he's come out on the other side of, and learned really effectively how to deal with stress in really tough situations. And excited to hear what you have to share on that, RJ, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Tim. In 1995, at the height of a banking career, as Tim mentioned, I was treasurer of the bank, actually, and I was managing about $5 billion. It was extremely stressful, a lot of pressure on me, and I started to take prescription pills. And soon thereafter, that turned into a full-blown drug addiction. So I ended up in a psychiatric hospital, of all places. And I spent 2 years in a rehab, and from there even was still not on a path to a positive life, and ended up going back down a dark path. And I reached a point where I'd given up on life, actually, and had started contemplating ways that I could self-destruct. But at that point in time, I was married and I had 3 beautiful daughters. And as I looked at them, I just knew that I had to find a way to turn my life around. And I began that journey. And somewhere in the early 2000s, between the 90s and the 2000s, I went on an intense journey of searching for some way to turn my life around. I looked at everything from metaphysics, self-help books, 12-step groups, therapy, and a number of other modalities, even Native American, shaman type activities, everything that I could do to try and change the way I approach life. Over most of those years, these programs that I went to were not particularly effective, but once in a while, I would discover one thing that could really impact my life and move it forward in a positive way. And by 2012, I had developed a philosophy that included 7 fundamental principles of how I could live life in any circumstances and maintain satisfying, a complete, a whole, fulfilling life. And sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's tough, and sometimes it goes smoothly. So those are the vicissitudes of life. But no matter what those emotions are, underlying that is a sense of calm, a sense of confidence, a sense of understanding, and the knowledge that my life is going to be okay. So I wanted to share today a little bit about that philosophy and those principles, and talk about how I implemented them, and maybe give you some strategies on what you could do if you're suffering right now from emotional distress. So just to give you an example, in March, as you know, the COVID locked us all down. I live in California. It was especially harsh type of lockdown that we did here. And I had a lot of friends that, they lost their jobs, they lost their income. Even if they didn't have the COVID, they had health problems, and they had family problems. One of my friends, parent, the father had the COVID. He was in a senior living facility. They wouldn't let my friend in there, and his father died with nobody at his side. So definitely some situations that could cause people to have serious emotional distress. So if any of you are feeling that right now, all I can tell you is that however things went for me, I had a confidence, I had a belief, I had faith that it would come out, I would come out on the other side, and I would look back on this experience and realize that there was a guiding hand of some force, some power that I'll talk about a little later, and that has guided my life. And that from here point forward, these experiences will help me, let's just say, fulfill my destiny. Each of us have a life purpose. Each of us do eventually reach a destiny. And the question is, what kind of destiny do you want to have? And how can you get there with the life purpose that you were meant to live? And the only way we can discover our life purpose is we need to peel away all of these emotional difficulties, all of these mind programs of negativity, self-loathing, and low self-esteem, and victimization, and some of the other things that really cause us to be mentally bound down. So let me start by revealing just a couple of the principles that really became important to me and that were the beginning of something that helped to change my life. So the first principle that I discovered came up when I realized that the whole world seemed to have gone into this victim mentality. Look around. Who is taking responsibility when something happens? Don't we always have to sue someone? Somebody's to blame for a problem that I have, and therefore I need to get some sort of compensation. And what I realized is, in talking to people, even those that had been actually harmed and did feel that they needed some justice, the process of getting that justice, whether there was a person who had harmed them that was being brought to a legal or criminal justice, that process was not fulfilling. That process was not easy, and it was emotionally in huge turmoil. And even if they got a monetary award, it never was a sense of satisfaction that they could move on. And so what I talked to them about is, what would happen if, instead of being the victim and needing the other people to admit they're wrong and the other people to acknowledge and beg forgiveness and things like that, what if I, or you in this case, to the person I'm talking to, took the responsibility and said, yes, the circumstances were out of my control, but how I choose to respond to those circumstances are within my control. So here's a story that I think is appropriate here to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. At some point, some years ago, I was taking the bus. I decided I wanted to commute to downtown Los Angeles, and taking the bus is a good way to do it because you don't have to fight the LA traffic and so on. But I needed to get to the bus stop, so I would drive my car to the bus stop. So one day, as I parked and I was waiting for the bus, I looked over and I saw the sign by my car, and it said, "Street sweeping on Tuesdays, no parking." And of course, it was Tuesday. And I knew these tickets, if you park there, are expensive, at least $100 or more. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I realized at that moment I had a great little brainstorm. I could get back in my car. I could drive maybe 2 or 3 stops down the road and park where it would be okay and catch the bus there and still make it all the way downtown. I'm thinking, my higher power, as we called it, or my own insight, that I could, still achieve what I wanted to achieve. Well, work ends, I'm taking the bus back, I get back to my car, and guess what? Somebody had hit my car and taken off. So instead of a $100 ticket, I now had a $500 or $600 car expense. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if I had it to do over again, I would have just been thankful to only have a ticket. But at the time, I thought, a ticket would not be in my best interest as far as moving forward in life. So once I had that experience, I recount it because it was really mind shifting for me. I started to see that, how do I know what experiences I'm having if I interpret it as a bad experience or something negative that's going to affect my life in a way that I won't like? How do I know that, actually? Because I don't know what's going to happen down the road, in which, had some other alternative path happened, that might have taken me to a whole different life experience, like the butterfly effect. And I just began to believe, however my life was going, whether it seemed a positive experience or it seemed a tough experience, a learning experience, failure or something like that, I could look at that and say, that's preparing me or guiding me to something that down the road, I'm going to be able to look back and say, I'm really glad that happened. So one of the gifts of the principles that I developed is that I have no regrets for anything in my life, because going all the way back to the time I was born, every single event that happened every second of every day moved me in a particular direction that led me to this moment in this conference right now and the opportunity to share with you. And right now, my life, despite the COVID and some of these other things you'd think, life could be difficult. I'm here to tell you that today, right now, I am at the best place I've ever been in my life. And I'm talking about psychologically, mentally, spiritually, and I just wouldn't want to be any other person. So when I talk to Tim and other people, and it sounds a little bit arrogant, but I say, I really love me. There's no other person I would rather be than myself, because I'm so full of this gratitude and this understanding of how my life is just so blessed. And what I'd like to share with you is, the first thing was, if you want to have that kind of a life, and in the midst of difficulties like this COVID, lost your job, health problems, relationship problems, no matter what the situation is, it is possible to look at the situation and flow through it, as I like to tell Tim, like a leaf on the river, and just trust that the river is taking me somewhere. It's not always a calm, just floating down the center. Sometimes there's rapids that we just get, crazy life going. And sometimes the leaf submerges and is dragged along the bottom of the river. That's no fun. Gravel and things. Just think about all the vicissitudes of life, and they're just grinding at me. But yet I know the river is flowing. I'm not in control. And if I let go of the control and trust this force of the river, which I'm going to talk about, that I can have peace in the midst of whatever afflictions or difficulties are surrounding me. So think about a hot air balloon. There's a wind blowing, and yet when you're in the balloon is going the exact speed of the wind. So inside the balloon, it feels completely calm. And yet from the outside of the balloon, people looking at it will see the balloon is moving quickly. It's in some sort of turmoil as it's being moved around by the wind. So that's what I would like to present to you as a way to be inside the balloon. And no matter what's going on in our external circumstances, it can't affect how we're seeing life, how we mentally respond to the events that are around us. So that first principle was, if I don't take responsibility for my life, I don't have any power to change it. If I think I need that person to change, if only my partner would be different the way that I think they should be, and not be somebody that I don't like. If they would be different, I could be happy. I don't like my job. I have a horrible boss. The work that I do is not satisfying. If only I had a different job, something that I could enjoy, then I would be able to be happy, or I'd be able to have positive feelings, and on and on and on. All of these life circumstances that we think are causing us to be stressed out is the thing that I focus on. No, it's not those external circumstances. It's how we are perceiving them. So let's go back to when we're born. And if you look at a little baby that's brand new baby, is that baby stressing out about, I don't like dinner today or whatever? No, the baby has no concept of information. It has sensory inputs, visual and auditory and touch and taste. And those are either they feel good or they don't. And the baby just reacts to it. And essentially all it wants is nourishment and to maintain a clean, healthy body by, having diaper changed or whatever it is. So the baby is not judging life as good or bad. It's just responding to the inputs it gets. And over time, that baby starts to grow up and inputs are coming their way. And it could be a friend or somebody, yelling at them, hey, don't do that. Maybe it's legitimate. They were about to touch a hot stove or something. But all of those experiences cause us to have these mind programs that say, this is not a good situation. I need to do something about it, escape, the fight, the flight, or the freeze response. And instead of that, and then we carry that even today, let's change that mind programming. And by changing our mind programming, we can change the interpretation that we have of the sensory inputs that are coming to us. Therefore, if you want to relieve stress, as I mentioned in my book, it's not about, oh, you got to meditate, eat more healthy, exercise, these various things that will help us to be calm. Those, I would have an analogy and say, let's think of a pressure cooker, and it's on the stove. And the pressure cooker is heating up, heating up, heating up. And when the temperature gets hot enough, there's a little valve that pops and the steam comes out of that pressure cooker. And at that point, the pressure is relieved. So think about meditation, for example. How many gurus and people out there say meditation is a key to peace and serenity and happiness? Well, I meditate. It is pleasurable, but I don't look at that as the solution to my problem. Because as soon as I stop meditating, if I were stressed out about something, I had a momentary relief, I'm feeling positive, but now I stop meditating, I get back in my environment, and just the problems all come back again. Meditation, maybe if you do it every day for years and years, like the monks in the East, it might have a permanent effect. But at this moment in time, all that does is temporarily relieve the stress, just like the valve releases the steam pressure. So what I propose is, rather than techniques that release the steam, we need to turn off the burner. Once you turn off the burner, there's no way that steam can build up. So how do we turn off that burner? Let me just bring up 3 principles that I do. And again, they're not something that I take an action on. They're just something that I change the way that I think. So after I accept responsibility, I'm now empowered to say, how do I want to approach life? And the very first thing that I want to do, and it's almost epidemic, is I have to give up being right. Now think about it. Every conflict, every war, every distress, personally, in our families, in the world, there's a conflict means somebody says, I'm right and you're wrong. You need to go with my way. You need to believe the way I'm believing. You need to do what I'm asking you to do. And if you do all those things, everything will be good. But if you don't, I'm going to attempt to impose my belief or my rightness upon you. So there's no way to have that peace and serenity in a permanent way as long as we are in conflict with the world. So how do we let go of the conflict? People say, hey, I can't be wrong, especially in things like politics or religion, these very incendiary areas of beliefs. So how do I be not right without capitulating to someone else and letting them be right and stepping all over me? So here is the secret. Before I impose my rightness or my opinion or the belief that I want you to accept, I'm going to stop first. I'm going to ask you, why do you have the position that you have? I'm going to listen really carefully and see where they're coming from. And I'm here to represent that. If we were born where they were born, if we grew up in the circumstances that they grew up, if we grew up in the location that they grew up, if we grew up in the cultural situation that they had or the religious situation that they had, and if we had the same mental capacity that they have, how do we know we wouldn't just be exactly like them? And so by seeing that, we develop some empathy and say, that person is doing the best they can do. That person is doing what they were created to do. Now, if they're doing something harmful, because there are bad guys in the world, and if somebody was doing something that would be harmful to me, that doesn't mean to just lay down and absorb that. Sure, we need to have a boundary. We need to defend ourselves. If you're in an abusive relationship, call the police. You can do something about it because you're taking responsibility for the situation. And you don't need to impose some certain thing that says, I need to change this person. He has to stop abusing me. You can't control other people, but you can control your response. So you get out of there and you find a way to move on and get in a better circumstance. It's not easy because battered women, for example, they're beaten down psychologically, and it's very difficult for them to have the empowerment to make a decision in their life. All I'm saying is that at some point we reach out to those people or they realize I've had enough. That's what I did with my drug addiction. I was harming people. And at some point they were pushing back on me. They were saying, you don't see the problem that you have? I didn't see it. I thought everything was fine. And they finally created a boundary and they said, you know what, you can't be with us anymore unless you're going to clean up your life. And so in the course of doing that, they took the empowerment and they made their life right and pushed me on the outside. And I now had to change if I wanted to be part of that, my family or that group. So giving up being right simply means listening to the other person, understanding where they're coming from, and maybe seeing that from their perspective, it's not unreasonable that they do believe that they're right in that situation. And once you do that, you diffuse all the conflict, and you start to have a discussion that says, I see what you're saying, and I have a different approach to it, and yet I don't think either of our approaches is right or wrong. They are just something different. And again, I'm ignoring that if something's really harmful, like someone's trying to use violence to achieve their goal. Sure, we're not going to see that point of view. But for the most part, for most of us, they're just conflicts of attitude, emotions, feelings, thoughts, and beliefs. They're just not so ingrained or so rigid that they're beyond our ability to change or see another point of view. So the two principles so far are assume responsibility for the results of my life. That empowers me to make a change. And by not imposing my belief system on other people or being rigid that I have to stick with my belief system, I can be open-minded and see another person's point of view. Now, the third principle is, interestingly, one of the most difficult that I find in talking with people for them to adopt. And that is love ourselves first and then others. Now, some of you may be familiar with the saying in the Bible where Jesus says to love your neighbor as yourself. Notice he didn't say just love your neighbor. He said as yourself. In other words, you can't give away love if you don't have it within yourself. And one of the ways I work with people and I test that, I say hold up a mirror or even just your cell phone and look in that and see your reflection. Can you look at that reflection and say, I love you. You are the most wonderful person. I would not want to be anybody else but you. And it's amazing that sometimes I just randomly meet people and I say, hey, are you willing to do an experiment? And there it is. You'd be surprised that maybe 80% of the people go, not really. They're just like, I'm just not there yet. And especially if I'm coaching people or someone's in therapy or a 12-step program or some other way that they're trying to change their life. I know when I first entered that 12-step program in the hospital, I did not love myself. I loathed myself. I had just been thinking about how I could, end my life. So obviously self-love was so far from anything that I had even contemplated. And yet I was in denial that I didn't like myself. Nobody goes, I suck. Maybe my life sucks, but nobody's really going around saying I'm a horrible person or I don't love myself. We have this denial. And yet when we confront it and we say, you know what, I do have a problem with my self-esteem and my self-love. Then again, we're open, we're empowered to be able to say, what can I do about it? And in my book, I have a little formula that I do. It comes back to the mirror experiment. And you look in the mirror and you just say, I love you. And sometimes I work with people and they go, I just can't say it. I look in the mirror and no, I'm frozen. It's fine. We don't have to be able to say it right now. Can you think about saying it? Well, no, I can't even think about saying it. Okay. Can you just hold up the phone and look at it? No, I can't even see myself in the reflection. Okay. Can you think about maybe someday you might be able to hold up the phone and you just keep working to some lower and lower goal or some lower and lower activity that you can do until the person says, okay, once a week, I can have my watch have a little alarm. The alarm's going to go off and I'm going to say, oh yeah, I remember, RJ has been working with me and he told me I'm supposed to do that thing. I don't want to do it, but at least I'm thinking about someday maybe doing it. So there's this idea of a willingness. Anything that we want to change about our life, there's a way to change it. The key is to take the first step. And the first step can be just as small a step as is necessary for me to be able to do it. And guess why? This comes from a Stanford professor, B.J. Fogg, and he came up with this Fogg method. It's called, I think, tiny goals, something like that. And he says, if you can just break something down, instead of saying, I'm, New Year's resolution, I'm going to exercise 3 times a week and join the gym and I'm going to lose all this weight. And, that's too big of a goal. We all fail our New Year's resolutions. Break something down that I know I can consistently do, because guess what that does? That builds a concept, a belief that I am a successful person. I've actually succeeded at something. And you may try to put it down and say, well, it wasn't much. Any success in our life, I promise you, begins to change our mindset, begins to have us believe I can achieve something. And once we do even the smallest little thing, we can do a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and we can expand to other things. So my daughter one day was visiting, and she asked me about this, and I said, I really want to exercise, but I just can't get to the gym. It's too hard to drive there and everything. And so I backed off a little bit. And ultimately, I had to back all the way down to just once a week, I'm going to walk out of the house, I'm going to walk down the driveway to the curb, and then I'm going to walk back. And that's my exercise for the day. Well, she's so funny, without me knowing it, she videotaped me walking down it, and she made a meme out of it. And it says, you know, my dad's trying to exercise, and right now his only goal is to walk to the driveway back. And as she's making this meme, it should, you know, the video is showing me walk. And she put it on her Facebook or Instagram, whatever it was, and it got all these, you know, likes and laughs or whatever. But that fact was, she actually was impressed. She actually said, well, you know, Dad, I got to say, I give you credit for no matter what it is, at least you're doing something. So break these things down into the littlest goals, start to succeed at something, even if it's just look in the mirror, right? Even if it's just, I'm going to take 3 steps from the living room to the kitchen or whatever, something that I know I can succeed at. And from there, build on that. And over time, as we succeed at more and more things, guess what? Our self-esteem grows and our self-love will grow. And again, the principle is love yourself first, then others. Once we actually start to build self-love within us, we don't feel obligated to be of service and to go out and, you know, people are calling us, can you help me do this or that? And we feel obligated. That's not building up our self-esteem in the most part. Sometimes being of service and helping somebody does feel good, but a lot of the time we're doing it out of obligation or pressure or a belief that we have to do it. And that is not working because we haven't loved ourselves enough first. But when we do it, the love starts bursting out of us. We can't help but to reach out and be of service to other people. And it's just as simple as this. Even today, I was walking down the sidewalk over in Encino, California, where I work. And as I walked down, a police officer, very controversial these days, had pulled over. I don't know, maybe they had to put something in their computer. And right as I walked by, the window was down. And I looked in and I said, officers, I realize you guys are in a very difficult situation. There's a lot of conflict going on. I just want you to know that I'm rooting for everything to work out, that you guys can come together in some way, that you can be successful as a police officer. So I wish you well, and I hope you have a good day. You know, the guy looked at me and he's like, what the heck? You know, who's this guy? But they looked at me and they go, you know what? Thank you for that. We do need a little bit of support. Now, that doesn't mean that I believe, you know, that there's not systemic racism in the police force. I actually am a supporter of Black Lives Matter, for example. I don't want to get into that, but just because I don't have to be right that that's the only way, I can be on both sides as far as reaching out with love, empathy, understanding, wisdom, and try to raise the level of understanding and the ability to interact in a positive way and not all these ad hominem attacks and conflicts that we have. We're so polarized in our society today. So that's it for today. I'm just going to talk about first, accept responsibility, then give up being right, and then work on our self-love. And as we do that, these other principles come together. And when something like COVID happens, I lost 80% of my income, but I said, you know what? Something's going to change here. And some other person, they lost their business, and they came to me and said, I have some ideas on, you know, how to turn the business around. It happens to be a car wash of all things. And I came up with a strategy, and I own a car wash now for the last 2 months. I mean, it's crazy. I would have never thought that at the beginning of the year, and I'm 65 years old, and what am I doing getting back into business? But it's just the way my leaf rolled. And it's kind of an exciting, fun time. And I've got a lot of enthusiasm for life, even though things are still tough. So that's my message today. And thank you for letting me be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, RJ. That was such a great story. And the car wash, man, it's so, even hearing about that from you in the past always seemed a little random, but it's amazing how things like that just work out, you know, when we trust that it is all going to be okay. You know, you talked about releasing being right, and I think this is such a powerful thing right now. especially because we want to change lives, or we think, we're so caught up in our own like rightness that we think other things are wrong, right? Rather than just a different point of view. So talk about like, how do you notice when you are just holding on to being right? And then what do you do? What are some tricks you use to release that?
Okay. The first thing, how do I know? My leaf goes off the river into a waterfall or something, and my life just starts feeling stressful. And just because I wrote a book on living stress free doesn't mean I'm always following these 7 principles.
Yeah.
I might can slip out of that, and it's really immediate for me because I start feeling headache or sweating or some sort of physiological response or some sort of mental thing where I go, I feel kind of twisted inside. What the heck happened? And I'll just look at one of those principles and say, you know what? I had an argument with this person that I tried to impose my rightness on them. And of course, given the heated political environment right now, and I don't need to express my personal political viewpoints, but I do know that I meet people and they have a different viewpoint than I do. And if I really think, how can you think that way? Almost everybody, we're so polarized. Everybody thinks, how does the other guy think that way? And then those guys are thinking, how do you think that way? And instead, I just went back and I said, you know what? Let me just hear what you're talking about. And I heard their whole story. I heard their whole philosophy. And then I just said, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And they go, oh, no, I haven't thought about that. I said, maybe that's an area to explore. And in the end, we have a common thread. We're not angry at each other because I took a minute to understand what they were doing, and then was able to suggest some things that maybe they hadn't thought of.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's 2 things there. Like when you're suggesting things other people haven't thought of because you have to be right, versus suggesting things people haven't thought of because you just honestly want to understand how they think, so that you can gain even greater understanding. I think that's such a powerful thing. And loving yourself first and then others. We had someone on earlier talking about healthy selfishness, which I love that concept, and I'm glad that there's some threads that were really coming together here throughout the day. And I think that for you, where do you kind of draw your own boundaries for what you allow, like how you allow other people to, like if someone is calling on you because they need something or something like that, where do you draw the line in there of when you help and when you don't, and how do you figure that out?
This new car wash venture is teaching me a lot. People come in and the old car wash before it failed was a full service hand wash. You drop your car off and they do the inside and the outside. And people are saying, oh, it's open again. And they're coming in. I go, no, I've changed it to, I put equipment in the tunnel and out. You stay in your car and you just drive through. It's the newest thing. You don't have to touch anybody and there's no contact. And, if you want to vacuum, they got the self-help vacuums. Well, lady comes in and she says, I want the full wash. I explain that we don't do that anymore. She goes, I'm telling you, I want this wash. It's impossible. And then she's like super upset and she's, I'm going to sue you or whatever the thing is she's doing. She's really imposing her rightness. I said, I'll tell you what, pull over here and I'll have somebody wash your car for you and they'll take care of it and just pay this normal fee. And she goes, are you kidding me? You're willing to do that? So again, being creative and not having to impose this right. I mean, how could I not be right? It's my business. It only does it a certain way. And yet, by coming up with a solution, he calmed down. And at the end, she says, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to try that tunnel because I really love the customer service. Yeah. So in that sense, I didn't need to have a boundary, but I did not accept her, verbal abuse. And some of the things she was doing, I said, time out for a second and let's see what we can do to resolve the matter. So verbal abuse is something I never accept. Anybody that tries to swear at me or an ad hominem attack, I'll try to diffuse the situation, or otherwise I don't need that person in my life. No. And of course, any kind of physical thing, I'll call the police, if it's something that's serious enough. I'm not willing to take anything that's going to cause me some kind of harm, physical, psychological, spiritual.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. And last thing here, just where can people find out more about you and your work or grab your book? Where can they find out more about that?
So I have a website, randaljohnson.com. And on the website, there's a number of resources, some of which are free. I have a Facebook group that you can join, and people talk about their stressful situations. And what I am committed to is when they go through this program that I've created, they can eliminate guilt, shame, and regret about the past. They can eliminate anxiety, worry, and fear about the future, and they can live a stress-free life in the present moment. And it's free just to join, and as long as you're willing to be vulnerable and talk about your situation, we can come up with strategies. And that Facebook group is Eliminate My Stress, Facebook/. And then randaljohnson.com you can enter your email address and get a number of resources that I have there. The book is available on Amazon, or when you go to my website, right at the top of the homepage, you can just click on that. And my contact information is there. If you email me, I return every single email, because more than anything else, I just want to help people. And to have an emotional stability there's probably nothing better in life than that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, RJ. It was such a pleasure chatting with you, and definitely loved your insights. And so we'll talk to you soon. And guys, we'll be back in a few for the next session.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you.